crossroads of two continents, Asia and Europe, Turkey is a true melting pot of cultures. Modern and ancient, urban and wild, spiritual and hedonistic. Turkey is an invitation to numerous journeys, journeys in time, and journeys for the senses. Turkey's past is expressed in its mosaics, in the remains of its ancient cities, in its Byzantine heritage, and in the splendor of the Ottoman culture. You're in Turkey. Sit down with a glass of tea. Listen to the call to prayer. Soak up the colorful atmosphere and get ready for a memorable journey. Istanbul is an excellent introduction to discovering Turkey. It is more than a city and worth a trip in itself. Due to its exceptional location along the Bosphorus between Europe and Asia, it has played a symbolic role between the East and the West since the beginning of its history. This convergence of cultures has shaped the city and contributed to its influence. Byzantium, Constantinople, Istanbul, such mythical names for the same city. Today, Istanbul shows several facets marked by its rich past. Hagia Sophia perfectly illustrates its history, written in successive layers. The basilica was built during the 6th century under the reign of Emperor Justinian to restore the splendor of the Roman Empire in the midst of Christianization. Inaugurated in 537, Hagia Sophia remained the largest church of the Christian world until the fall of Constantinople in 1453. Under Sultan Mehmed, it became a mosque, a function it kept until 1935, when Ataturk turned it into a museum. Under the central dome that rises majestically, the visitor can admire the beautiful mosaic of Christ as a glorious symbol of Christianity at its height. In the 17th century, Sultan Ahmed I wanted to build a mosque that would equal or even surpass Hagia Sophia. The Blue Mosque is a masterpiece of harmony and elegance. It owes its name to the 2,000 ceramic tiles from Iznik that line the interior walls. Near the major religious monuments, the Topkapi Palace was the residence of the Ottoman sultans for almost 4 centuries. They lived there with their entourage. The Fountain of Ahmet III, one of the city's most beautiful fountains, symbolizes the entrance to the palace. The palace has expanded over the centuries, but its overall layout, set around 4 courts, has not changed. The Ottomans followed the Byzantine tradition of isolating the monarch from the people. The palace exhibits amazing treasures, including the famous Spoonmaker diamond. This 86 is said to have been found in a dump and bought by a street vendor in exchange for 3 spoons. Another exhibit is this gold dagger inlaid with 3 large emeralds that was coveted by Peter Ustinov in the movie Topkapi. The palace overlooks the Bosphorus and faces the Galatasaray district. Many foreigners, diplomats, and merchants who dealt with the empire used to live here. Four private pavilions for the Sultan occupy the 4th court. At the end of the tulip garden, 2 of them are particularly charming. The Yerevan Kiosk was built in 1635 to commemorate the conquest of Yerevan, today's Armenia, from Persia. And in the circumcision room, decorated with magnificent ceramic tiles, the sons of the sultans came to rest after the painful rite of passage. According to popular belief, the harem was a place of debauchery for the sultan. Actually, it housed the private apartments of the imperial family. Tradition and the constraints of the etiquette regulated every aspect of life in the harem. However, Sultan Mehmed IV did have 112 children. upwards of 500 people could live in the harem. Below, near the banks of the Bosphorus, drawn by the sense of spices, follow the crowd to reach the Egyptian market. Up until recently, merchants here still sold products such as cinnamon, cannon powder, rabbit fat, aloe, saffron, and ass's milk. Most of the shops have now chosen to sell more common products such as used cheese, olives, delicious fish from the Bosphorus or the Sea of Marmara, and the obligatory spices. All the ingredients of traditional Turkish cooking are available in this noisy and animated hall of tastes. Here, no need to beg gourmets to taste all these sweets, from dates to lookums and the irresistible pastries. Through the labyrinth of covered streets above the Egyptian market, you can reach the Grand Bazaar with its many products for tourists. The Mosque of Suleiman the Magnificent welcomes visitors for a peaceful and quiet pause. Istanbul's largest and most grandiose mosque was built between 1550 and 1557. Although impressive in size, the mosque's interior remains pleasantly simple. Built on one of the hills overlooking the Golden Horn, this remarkable landmark also offers a beautiful vista. At sunset during Ramadan, on the huge esplanade between Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque, small restaurants actively get ready for the iftar, the moment when fasting is interrupted. All the doner kebabs swing into action. Ramadan is a time of prayer, but also a celebration that livens up the city. After a long day of fasting without drinking nor eating, the Muslims here are waiting for the muezzin to light up the minarets and to begin to sing. Family members and friends can start to celebrate. In this friendly atmosphere, they enjoy the opportunity to meet again and have a good time together. On the Bosphorus, the small harbor below the Egyptian bazaar is a bustling place all day. Despite several large bridges, navigation remains the most commonly used means of transportation between the two continents. palaces built by the Sultan spread further north along the western shore of the Bosphorus. At the end of the 18th century, the sultans left the Golden Horn and Topkapi to settle in sumptuous and lavishly decorated marble residences. During the 19th century, the sultans became increasingly drawn to the Occident, whose influence is felt in the architecture of the palaces and the Baroque-style mosques. Slightly further north, on the European shore of the Bosphorus, stands the Rumelia fortress with its thick walls. It was built by Mehmed the Conqueror in only 4 months on the narrowest point of the strait to prepare the siege of Constantinople that soon surrendered. Istanbul is also a modern city, in many ways similar to major Western capitals with its stores and crowded pedestrian streets. You can feel Istanbul's attraction for Europe, yet it has come to terms with its rich historical past and numerous cultural influences. It is also a city of contrasts. Within minutes, visitors can go from a modern city to typical scenes such as these fishermen lined up on the Galata Bridge.
Hello?
Despite appearances, Istanbul isn't the capital. Few visitors ski, yet it embodies the contradictory trends that express themselves throughout the country. Today, Ankara is a lively city with ministries, foreign embassies, hospitals, and light industry. The Kocatepe Mosque, finished in 1987, revives the gigantic architectural scale so typical of the Imperial Ottoman style. Its imposing silhouette is the main landmark of the city's modern center. Even though one can feel the fervor towards Islam in the country, Turkey remains a secular state. The mausoleum of Ataturk, a figure still venerated today for having allowed Turkey to enter the modern world, symbolizes this distinction between the spiritual and the temporal. Crowning the hill, this imposing citadel dates back to the 9th century. The interior walls are even more ancient. The city's most ancient mosque was built in the 12th century. Around this monument, a traditional Turkish village with its typical wooden houses is being restored. Like all of Turkey, Ankara is full of contrasts. In several districts of the capital, wood is still used for cooking and heating. The colorful little houses at the foot of the citadel are called Çeçekondas, which means houses built overnight. They contribute to the rampant urbanization problem the city is trying to control without much success. This suburb accommodates a constant flow of peasants from Anatolia who leave their land hoping for a better life. Further up the hill, protected by the citadel, old Ottoman houses create a special atmosphere in this district. The dry fruit markets are a must, as well as the raisins from Anatolia that are eaten all day long. The center of Anatolia, the heartland of Turkey, offers a striking contrast to the Mediterranean coastline. The large undulating plains seem desolate with only herds of sheep. Yet dynamic and amazing towns called Anatolian tigers are suddenly emerging there. In the booming town of Aksaray, little has survived from the antique Roman town formerly called Archelaïs. Along these modern roads in the heart of Anatolia, life seems to peacefully follow its course. But this region, the bridge between Europe and Asia and the cradle of many civilizations, has seen the armies of dozens of empires go by. These vestiges bear witness to the vivacious commercial activity of old. Near the Kizil Mosque, this strange minaret dating back to 1236 is called the Turkish Tower of Pisa because of its tilted appearance. Deeper and deeper into the Cappadocia region, numerous cave cities appear. Cappadocia was the heart of the Hittite Empire prior to becoming an independent kingdom, then a Roman province mentioned in the Bible. Visitors appreciate entering the depths of these mysterious underground cities excavated several centuries BC. The natural environment of Cappadocia is also exceptional. This barren area was shaped by a geological history of rare intensity in constant evolution that never ceases to amaze the visitors. Cappadocia is one of the best places in the world for a first hot air balloon experience. Flight conditions are exceptionally good. As for the scenery, it is simply unforgettable. After dawn, the sky fills with balloons. It is unquestionably the best way to admire the lavish scenery where Mother Nature's works defy the imagination. On to Orta Hisar, a village in the Gorem Valley, spared by mass tourism. It has preserved the atmosphere of a charming rural village. The main attraction is a castle-like volcanic formation used as a fortress during Byzantine times. In the valleys of the area, fairy chimneys unfold as far as the eye can see. This is the pretty town of Uchasar. Its castle is a high volcanic peak set at 1,300 meters and carved out with tunnels and openings. Today, this tourist attraction offers a panoramic view of the valleys and countryside of Cappadocia. With the development of tourism, the troglodyte dwellings have been transformed into elegant guest houses. On the other side of the peak, life unfolds in dwellings carved in the tufa. All the occupants are aware that they're living in a fragile world, a world in suspension, doomed to disappear someday due to erosion's endless activity. With its surreal sceneries that defy the imagination, this region was shaped by the combination action of wind and rain on the tufa created by volcanic eruptions. The caves excavated at the top of the rock faces were used as pigeon houses. The villagers used to raise these birds for their droppings, which they used as a fertilizer. Few places in the world offer such clear evidence of the successful fusion between human life and an exceptional natural environment. At the beginning of the Love Valley, the last phase of erosion is in progress. The layer of basalt has completely disappeared, leaving only a superficial and fragile layer of tufa subject to the assaults of wind and rain. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, yet many of these natural wonders claimed by man are doomed to disappear. Built in the volcanic tufa, the town of Gorem is an attraction in itself. In the middle stands the Rua Kalesi, a high volcanic peak crowned by a Roman temple carved into the rock. Here, the proliferation of cave churches testifies to the major surge of mysticism that swept over this region. Today, the difficulty lies in preserving this heritage that includes approximately 1,000 sites exposed to the rough continental climate and the flow of, at times, inconsiderate tourists. The Tokali Kalisi is one of the most beautiful churches of Gorem. Its frescoes, painted around 950, illustrate scenes of the life of Christ that unfolds like a picture book. Pushed by the wind, we head north of Goram. Here, the scenery offers new marvels and formations molded by erosion. We can let our imagination run wild by trying to guess which shapes of objects, characters, or animals have been carved out in these stone chimneys. This enchanting setting along the Red River leads us to Avanos, formerly called Vanessa. This modern city is famous for its pottery. The artisans still use the red clay of the river, a practice that has remained unchanged for centuries. The oldest traces of this form of artistry go back to 6000 BC. Prior to the invention of plastic, Avanos was the most famous production center of Turkey. Today, Kalip is a faithful heir of this legacy. Avanos was also famous for the talent of its weavers, particularly during the Ottoman era. Today, although the artisans use synthetic materials and nylon, they also continue to work with silk. During the month of October, the caterpillars settle in their silk cocoons. Boiling water will prevent them from ever becoming butterflies. The precious thread is collected by following a meticulous and complicated procedure. The beginning of the thread must be found in order to empty the cocoon and recover the silk threads on skeins. Almost all small family businesses have disappeared. They were replaced by modern workshops. However, in recent years, there has been a renewed willingness to preserve a know-how for which Turkey was so famous, including the weaving of rugs. Along the roads, the presence of numerous caravanserai attests to the intense trading activity in ancient times. Many of these monuments reflect this particularly rich past. Heading west, this is the imposing Sultan Han caravanserai, whose construction began in 1229. It was restored and certainly is today one of the most beautiful caravanserais in Turkey. The inner courtyard, lined with porticos, has a mosque in its center. During the 18th century, the Seljuk built several caravanserais throughout Anatolia along the Silk Road. These fresh supply posts were built one day's journeys apart to facilitate trade exchanges. The construction costs were covered by the Sultan and paid through tributes levied on the profitable exchange of goods. The 13th century Opruki caravanserai is not situated on the ancient Silk Road. It was built with Roman vestiges, demonstrating, if need be, the tremendous archaeological potential of the region. At the bottom of the caravanserai, a strange volcanic lake lets a feeling of mystery float over the site. Our journey in the heart of the Anatolian steppe leads to Konya. This town is an open-air museum of Seljuk architecture. One could just admire the exterior facades of its buildings, but it would be a shame to miss the splendors within. The Inchi minaret was a Quranic school built in 1264. The main interest of this building lies in its richly sculpted gate with Arab inscriptions. The minaret behind the gate was called the Slender Minaret, after which the Quranic school was named. The town owes its charm to the combination of modern and traditional elements. Konya is a religious city where pilgrims and Oriental influences blend. One never tires from contemplating the finesse of the minarets that stand out like rockets towards the sky. One of the most important mystic philosophers of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum was Jalaluddin Rumi. His followers called him Mevlana, which means our guide. He founded this dervish convent. To pray, the dervish do a ritual dance symbolizing oneness with God. With the right hand held high, they receive blessings from heaven and communicate them to earth with the palm of their left hand towards the ground. One can come to pray on Mevlana's tomb and that of his son. Both are surmounted with huge turbans, symbols of a spiritual authority. There are also numerous dervish tombs nearby. In the adjoining mosque, several exposed silk prayer carpets are the object of intense worship. Many Muslims come here on pilgrimage. Turkey never ceases to surprise the traveler. North of Antalya, 3 large freshwater lakes are surrounded by mountains. Their names, Burdur, Egerdir, and Beyazehir. The Beyazehir Lake is certainly the most beautiful, with its charming small town where traditional and modern homes blend in harmony. The town used to have a strategic position on the caravan road that linked Konya to the Mediterranean Sea. In Beyazehir, you will discover the traditional and authentic face of Turkey, which the coastal towns have lost. The town has one of the most admirable medieval mosques of central Anatolia. The architecture is remarkable, with 39 wooden pillars and a mihrab decorated in blue ceramic tiles. Although Islam is the dominant religion in Turkey, the coexistence of various religions is exemplary in this country. The religious communities have in fact managed to live together. This spirit of tolerance is fundamental in an area where several worlds converge. By following a Roman aqueduct towards the Mediterranean Sea, we reach the fertile crescent that extends east of Anatolia, formerly called Pamphylia, with fields of cotton, fruits, and vegetables. Anatolia has superb Greek and Roman theaters, but the most beautiful of all is that of Aspendos. Built by the Romans, cared for by the Byzantines and the Seljuk, it was restored after Ataturk visited the site. The theater provides seating for 15,000 spectators. It is used today to put on numerous shows and concerts. It is greatly appreciated for the exceptional technical characteristics of its stage and its magnificent acoustics. The flourishing town of Antalya is located above a gulf dominated by the Taurus Mountains on the edge of a plateau with cliffs plunging into the sea. Sophisticated and relaxed, it has the advantages of a large city, yet has managed to preserve its historical center. In ancient times, the city walls were used to resist attacks. Today, they prevent traffic from invading its narrow streets so as to better enjoy the charms of this Ottoman town. This ancient Roman harbor was restored in the 1980s to become a marina for yachts and excursion boats. A few fishermen are also left. From here, one can explore the islands of the Gulf of Antalya or visit other towns along the coast such as Phalessis, Olympos, or Kale. One can also simply enjoy the splendors of the Oriental Mediterranean seaside. This is the heart of the Mare Nostrum, an amazing melting pot of civilizations whose numerous influences still make up its wealth. The journey continues along the coast. Kalkan is a former Greek Ottoman town. Discovered in the 1980s by travelers searching for a simple life and tranquility, this small Mediterranean village recently built a marina and developed resort accommodations. Yet Greek houses and traditional Ottoman homes still line the streets of Kalkan, and the fishermen continue to liven up the harbor. Beach lovers should be blessed with a few mythical places such as Ulu Deniz, a sheltered lagoon that can't be seen from the scene. When arriving here from the hills, one discovers the splendid view of a bay of crystal clear water, a sandy beach, and the sea in the background. Because of its beauty, this site is a much sought-after spot for filmmakers and photographers. By following the Mediterranean coast, hidden south of a large bay, one discovers Fitiyi, a very ancient town formerly known as Telmessos. It belonged to the Lycian Federation prior to falling under Persian domination during the 6th century BC. It was then occupied by the Athenians, followed by the Romans during the 2nd century. Most of the ancient buildings were destroyed by the 1958 earthquake. However, strange-looking sarcophagi built around 450 still remain. The town expanded around these tombs. As for the tomb of Amyntas behind the town, its facades were built in the style of an Ionic temple. Bodrum symbolizes a more modern Turkey. This resort town is often referred to as the Turkish Saint-Tropez. But the vestiges of history are never far. The castle overlooking the town was built by the Knights of Hospitallers who took Bodrum in 1402, taking advantage of a moment of weakness of the young Ottoman Empire. Fishing boats and the yachts of the Turkish jet set line up along the docks of the harbor. A few local sponge fishermen even managed to earn a decent living from their activity. Bodrum has all the charm of a seaside resort, but for the tourist seeking peace and quiet, the high season may not be as enjoyable. However, in the spring and the fall, the town recovers all of its discreet charms. the Bodrum airport, Milas will most probably appeal to those who wish to take advantage of a pleasant stopover away from the artifices of the seaside resorts. Milas has preserved a few of its several hundred years old residences, as well as beautiful Ottoman houses from the beginning of the 20th century. Life in this old village perched on a hill is a typical example of Turkish tradition. Every Tuesday, peasants from the surrounding area sell their produce at a pretty local market. Visitors will enjoy strolling around and reveling in the colors, aromas, atmosphere, and kindness of the inhabitants. Those with a passion for history will easily be able to explore the numerous archaeological sites. Aphrodisias offers an insight into the magnificence and size of these classical cities that have disappeared today. The city was, of course, named after the Greek goddess of fertility, sexuality, and pleasure. All that remains of Aphrodite's temple are beautiful porticos standing among the fields. A path leads to a remarkably well-preserved stadium. Most of the 30,000 seats are still in good condition. One can easily imagine the atmosphere that prevailed during games, chariot races, and gladiators' fights. The city had a sculpture school. The Odeon is a small marvel built in marble during the 1st and 2nd centuries. Buried under a layer of mud for centuries, its state of preservation is almost intact. At the end of the 5th century, Neoplatonic philosophers still taught here. The situation changed, however, during the Byzantine era. The Temple of Aphrodite became a plain Christian church, and the ancient monuments were destroyed to use the stones needed for the construction of the fortifications. After having lost its former glory, the city suffered the attacks of Tamerlane in 1402. It never recovered. Later, the Turkish village of Cer sprung up on its site. Deeper into the mountains, the cliff of Pamukkale shelters the ancient site of Hierapolis. Another major attraction in this area is nature's eccentricity. The hot thermal springs that drip down the hillside deposit calcium oxides that cover the entire cliff with white concretions that over time have formed these large natural pools. The Romans quickly realized that these thermal springs had therapeutic properties. At the end of the 2nd century BC, Hierapolis became a very popular resort. Many people from the ancient world came here to heal. Today, Hierapolis remains one of Asia's most beautiful necropoli. Approximately 12,000 tombs line up on each side of a path that leads to the gate of the city. It stretches over almost 2 kilometers with ancient thermal baths in its center. At the beginning of the fall, upon leaving Hierapolis, the large plains surrounding Denizli bloom with delicate white balls of cotton. It is difficult to grow, and harvesting is by no means a pleasant experience. One must move around in plantations of shrubs whose branches are dry and hard. The owners usually employ seasonal workers from Eastern Europe who camp in the area during the picking. After the initial harvest, one must wait for the next flowers to bloom to pick the cotton again.
Hep Adıyaman merkez.
Atatürk Barajı'nın dibindeyiz.
Hangi köy Atatürk Barajı'nın dibi?
The road to Izmir goes through this plain where a different pottery style prevails. The work is very precise and meticulous. The pottery is more artistic than that of Avanos. The result is commensurate with the hours spent to create unique pieces that are very sought after by collectors. Each style represents a different region. Heading back to the Aegean Sea, Efes is an amazing Greco-Roman site. With this avenue leading to the harbor, Efes was the foremost economic center of the region. The first traces of civilization here go back to the 3rd millennium BC. It also was an intellectual center. Heraclitus headed the Ionian philosophy school here. Apostle John wrote his gospel in Efes, and the first Christian communities were founded here. The Library of Celsus is a prestigious example of imperial art in Asia. The marble columns, the ornate decoration, nothing was beautiful enough for this edifice built to shelter the mausoleum of a Roman governor. Archaeologists are still at work here. The task at hand is gigantic given the size of the site. Further towards the north lies Izmir, the most important city on the Aegean Sea. Its past resurfaces at the mention of Smyrna, a cosmopolitan city and major harbor that reached its height under Alexander the Great. The old Oriental houses still lend a charm similar to that of Alexandria in Egypt. A major part of the city was destroyed by a fire in 1922. In the district of Alsancak, several narrow streets were spared by the flames. Numerous pretty Levantine houses, some of which were restored with care, have become fashionable cafes and restaurants. The interesting and picturesque bazaar of the city is a genuine labyrinth. Once again, the visitor will be able to revel in the charms of this country that is searching for an original course between contemporary and the limbo of its complex, rich, and fascinating history.